The yard was on fire. Not with flames, but with noise. Hundreds of men were shouting at once. Some waved their arms. Some climbed onto high walkways. Others ran, not knowing where to go. Sirens screamed so loud they hurt the ears. Smoke filled the air, thick and grey, making it hard to see more than a few steps ahead. Guards were trapped. Some were bleeding. Some were shaking. Some were being held by inmates who shouted into the chaos, "Nobody move." This was Attica Correctional Facility, and the prison had exploded into chaos. 4 days, the world would watch this place in shock. But right now, in this moment, no one knew how it would end. Someone shouted that the state police were coming. Someone else shouted that it was too late. Then a loud crack echoed through the yard. Everyone froze. That sound would change everything. 2 weeks earlier, Attica felt tense, but quiet. Too quiet. My name is Robert Hayes. I was a corrections officer at Attica in 1971. I had worked prisons for years, but Attica was different. The walls were thick. The rules were strict. And the anger inside never fully went away. Attica held more than 2,000 men. Most were locked in small cells for most of the day. The food was bad. The showers were few. Medical care was slow. Men complained all the time. Most complaints went nowhere. That was the low part. Slow pressure building, day after day. Attica was an old prison. Steel bars. Stone walls. Long cell blocks that echoed every sound. In the morning, you heard doors slam open and shut. At night, you heard coughing, crying, and sometimes yelling. Many inmates came from faraway cities. Their families could not visit often. They felt forgotten. That feeling grew. One morning, a small fight broke out in the yard. Nothing serious. But guards rushed in hard. Too hard. Men were shoved. Some were hit. A few were thrown into isolation. That day, something changed. The yard went quiet. Inmates looked at guards differently. Not with fear. With focus. Soon after, inmate leaders started talking. Quietly. They talked in lines. In cells. During short yard time. They shared stories. About bad food. About no toilet paper. About letters that never arrived. They wanted change. Basic change. Better food. Medical care. Fair treatment. They wrote lists. They hoped someone would listen. That was the low moment of hope. Because no one did. On September 9th, it happened. During a movement between cell blocks, confusion broke out. A door was left open too long. Too many men were in one place. Someone shouted. Someone ran. Then many ran. Guards lost control in seconds. Inmates pushed forward, flooding into the yard. Gates were forced open. Alarms went off too late. That was the first high moment. The point of no return. I remember running toward the noise. Then stopping. Because there were too many of them. Inmates surrounded guards. Some guards were taken. Others escaped. Some were hurt. The yard filled fast. Men climbed onto walkways and waved sheets and signs. They were shouting demands. Not random words. Clear demands. For the first time, inmates were in charge. They organized quickly. They helped injured men. They protected hostages. They set rules inside the yard. No fighting between inmates. No harm to hostages. They wanted to be heard. That shocked everyone. News spread fast. State officials arrived. Reporters gathered outside the walls. Helicopters hovered overhead. The country was watching. Inside, inmates formed a council. They read their demands out loud. Simple things. Human things. They wanted food they could eat. Showers more than once a week. Medical care when sick. They wanted respect. That was a high moment. Calm in the middle of chaos. I watched from behind the lines. I saw inmates speak clearly into microphones. I saw hostages sitting nearby, alive. Some inmates even protected guards from angry crowds. This wasn't madness. It was controlled anger. That made it more dangerous. Negotiations began. Officials talked. Inmates listened. Days passed. The sun rose and set over the yard. Food was passed. Tents were set up. It felt like time was stuck. But tension grew. Both sides waited for the other to blink. Some officials wanted to keep talking. Others wanted it over. Fast. They said control must be taken back. No matter what. That's when fear returned. Inside the yard, inmates sensed it. They shouted that they wanted safety. They wanted promises. They wanted the state to agree in writing. That didn't happen. On the fourth day, the mood changed. Helicopters flew lower. Troopers gathered. Guns were loaded. The inmates knew. They felt it in the air. Someone shouted, "They're coming." That's when the yard went wild again. Men grabbed signs. Hostages were moved. Everyone ran. I stood behind the line, heart pounding. I saw the smoke start. I heard the shouting rise. I knew what was coming. And I knew it would be bad. Because once force is chosen, there is no taking it back. And as the first shots prepared to be fired, one thought ran through my mind. This prison would never be the same. And neither would the country. The morning air felt wrong. It was quiet, but not calm. The kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. The inmates knew it. The guards knew it. Everyone was waiting. Negotiators stood near the wall, talking into microphones. They told the inmates to stay calm. They said they wanted peace. They said they were working on solutions. But the inmates had heard words before. Words had never changed anything. Inside the yard, inmate leaders walked from group to group. Stay together, they said. No fighting. Protect the hostages. They knew one mistake could end everything. The hostages sat in the open. Some were scared. Some were exhausted. A few trusted the inmates more than the state outside the walls. That part shocked many people later. But inside the yard, it made sense. Food was passed around. Water too. Men shared what little they had. That was a low moment. Not weak. Human. Men who had nothing were still sharing. Outside the prison, pressure grew. Politicians argued. Police commanders argued. Everyone wanted control back. They said the prison had to be retaken. They said order mattered more than talks. Some warned it would end badly. They were ignored. I stood with other officers behind the line. We were told to stay back. State troopers were arriving now. Hundreds of them. Helmets. Rifles. Gas masks. This was no longer just a prison problem. This was a state decision. From the yard, inmates could see it too. The uniforms. The weapons. The helicopters circling lower. They shouted louder. We want amnesty. We want safety. They knew what happened when force was used. History had taught them that. A message came through the loudspeaker. This is your final warning. Lie face down on the ground. Some inmates did. Others shouted back. They did not trust the voice anymore. Trust had died days ago. That was the high moment of tension. Everything stretched tight. I remember a guard next to me whispering, "This is going to be a massacre." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I couldn't. Suddenly, helicopters moved into position. Gas masks went on. Troopers raised their weapons. Time slowed. I could hear my own breathing. Then the gas was dropped. White clouds burst across the yard. Men coughed. Men screamed. Men ran in every direction. Some hostages tried to lie flat. Others were pulled along in panic. The yard disappeared behind smoke. That was the moment everything fell apart. Gunfire followed. Fast. Loud. Endless. Not aimed shots. Sprays. The sound was like tearing metal. Men dropped. Some didn't move again. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The operation lasted minutes. It felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, the yard was silent. Too silent. Bodies lay everywhere. Some inmates. Some hostages. Blood soaked into the dirt. That was the lowest moment. The moment you realize control has been won, But humanity has been lost. Orders were shouted. Inmates were forced to the ground. Hands were tied. Wounded men cried for help. Some cries stopped. I walked into the yard afterward. My boots stuck to the ground. I saw faces I recognized. Men who had spoken calmly days earlier. Now they were still. Outside the walls, officials said control was restored. They said it was necessary. They said lives were saved. Inside the walls, we knew the truth. Something terrible had happened. And it would not stay hidden. Because families would ask questions. Doctors would look at wounds. Reporters would compare stories. And the story would not match the official version. As I stood there, staring at the aftermath, one thought hit me harder than any sound that day. The riot was over. But the real chaos was just beginning. Because what happened in that yard would soon shake the entire nation. And when the truth came out, nothing about prisons in America would ever be the same again. The truth did not stay buried. It tried to. At first, officials spoke with strong voices. They said the inmates had killed the hostages. They said force was the only option. They said the state had acted to save lives. For a short time, many people believed them. But facts have a way of coming out. And this time, they came out slowly, then all at once. Doctors began to speak. Autopsies were done. They showed something shocking. The hostages had not been killed by inmates. They had been killed by gunfire during the retaking of the prison. That truth hit like a bomb. Families were devastated. Angry. Broken. They demanded answers. That was the highest peak of the story. The moment the official story collapsed. Reporters dug deeper. Photos from the yard were released. Witnesses spoke out. Guards, inmates, and doctors told what they saw. Stories did not match what the state had said. Not even close. People across the country watched in disbelief. Lawsuits followed. Big ones. Inmates who survived spoke about beatings after the riot. About being forced to crawl. About being threatened and punished for speaking out. Some guards spoke too. Quietly. They said the orders were rushed. They said warnings were ignored. They said the violence went too far. That was a low moment for the system. The moment it had to look at itself. Years passed. Courtrooms filled. Evidence stacked up. Finally, the state admitted wrongdoing. Not everything. But enough. Survivors were paid settlements. Families of the dead were compensated. It was not justice. But it was acknowledgement. The impact went far beyond Attica. Prison policies were reviewed across the country. Oversight increased. Inmate rights were discussed openly. Negotiations during prison unrest became standard. Attica became a warning. A lesson written in blood and silence. Inside prisons, things began to change. Slowly. Some conditions improved. Some communication channels opened. Some abuses were no longer hidden so easily. Not enough. But more than before. I stayed in corrections for a few more years. But I was never the same. I had seen what happens when pressure is ignored and force is rushed. I had seen order win and humanity lose. People ask me now what Attica really was. It was not just a riot. It was a mirror. Held up to the prison system. And to the country. Attica exploded into chaos because voices were ignored for too long. Because anger had nowhere to go. Because when people are treated like they do not matter, they eventually shout loud enough that the whole world hears. And once the world heard Attica, it could never pretend again. That is the story. That is why Attica is remembered. And that is why American prisons were changed forever.